Today we'll be sharing the newest functionality found within the VictorOps platform. We'll hear from the people that built the feature as well as the current customer who's using the Transmogrifier today. Let's get started. Our speakers today are Daniel Zasek from 911 Labs. He's been involved in technology since early childhood, even launching his first startup while in junior high. He's a serial entrepreneur and is presently the founder and CTO of 911 Labs, a company that provides DevOps services to startups. We also have Joni Klippert, our VP of Product here at VictorOps. She specializes in bringing technology products to market and iterating on the product to meet customer needs and market demands. And then finally, we have Nate Grebe, who is our go-to guy for all things technical support here at VictorOps. He loves working directly with our customers and integration partners to improve our product. Now, let's get started. I'll kick it off to Joni to explain why we built this new feature in the first place.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who are familiar with VictorOps, we've really set out to build a product that delivers incredible amounts of value to our customers who are, on-call, essentially IT teams, after that initial page. So once you've been alerted to an incident, we focus on features that help you actually and meaningfully solve problems faster. So we came up with a little tool called the Transmogrifier. It's a Calvin and Hobbes joke, right, that essentially you can put anything into this box and it will make it whatever you want it to be. And in technical terms, we call that a rules engine. So from the very beginning of our company, we've always thought, what if we could surface how problems were solved last time or otherwise information about how to solve problems along with the alarms themselves? So we bit off a little piece of this problem and decided to start with a story about attaching run books, so essentially wiki information that all companies have about their systems, to alarms, so that if you're the person who receives the on-call page, there's associated documentation about either a triage document or actual steps as to how to solve that problem. But then we tackled something a little bit bigger, and everything falls into two buckets. But essentially, there are annotations, so the notion of attaching relevant assets to alarms. So this could be the runbook I just discussed, but just as easily it could be a deep link into a monitoring system. It could be a graphite graph or other graphs showing you exactly maybe what the load is on that server at that time, if that's the first thing you would go look at, or notes that are relevant to the person who are solving the problem. Other than annotations, we also have transformations. So that's the idea that after receiving the alarm, we can change an element of the key value pair to make that alert behave differently. This may help you quiet alert noise. It helps you with advanced routing and that sort of thing. So this rules engine that we've built is because all of our customer systems are like snowflakes. And the things that they want to do or need to do with them and how that relates to their on-call teams is all very different. So we've provided you with a tool to allow you to make on-call stuck less. So I touched on a couple of these things, but here are some of the key things and value that you can derive from the Transmogrifier. So the first thing is maintaining continuous documentation. So we all hear about continuous deployment, right? Like our systems are being updated, code is being deployed faster, and it makes it even harder to make sure that we're documenting all of these changes in our systems. So if we provide you with tools that allow you to sort of maintain and update that documentation in real time and directly associate it with the alarms that would be waking someone up in the middle of the night, we're providing you with a tool to help actually make use of these wiki articles and this documentation. What we hear a lot of times in the market is that documentation is broken, right? A lot of times it takes someone just as much time to find the right article as it does to solve the problem again. So we are aiming to tackle this piece and this sort of time sink that occurs after an alarm is received. So this documentation, as I mentioned, could include things like triage documents and runbooks. It could also be graphs or notes. We have some people who have even, passed along conference call information or other assets that help let the person know who's, squinting at their phone in the middle of the night what it is to do with that alarm. The next piece that we talked about has to do with transformations, actually the next two do, which is quieting alert noise. So if you have certain monitoring systems that you know like to send you critical pages that aren't actually actionable or critical pages, based on key value pairs within that alarm, you can change the state of that alarm. So you can change it just to an info and still know, or a warning, and know that those things are going on, but not necessarily initiate an entire paging cycle based on that alarm. And then the next piece is paging the right person every time. So based on multiple values within alert or a series, you may know that there is unfortunately just one person on your team that ultimately is going to be able to solve that problem. So let's make sure that we cut out any middlemen there and get that alert right to that person immediately, instead of having to escalate or have somebody else try to fix it who ultimately won't be able to. So those are some of the key value props in a few examples, and I'm just going to run through several other examples that we've seen while this feature has been in beta from our other customers. So obviously runbooks, like we talked about. We talked about quieting alert noise, and so this might be because you're going to take down some nodes to do some maintenance on part of your production system or something like that. So instead of re-instrumenting all of the monitoring, telling it to be quiet, you can instead just sort of per host or per system or monitoring tool essentially have like a temporary and more specific maintenance mode. And other than quieting, you might actually want to make certain things noisier, right? We have a lot of different inputs that come into our system, and some of those may be things like, if I get a voicemail from this customer or this person from a knock or something, I need that voicemail to go directly to the on-call person. And so based on some cool Hubot magic, you could make that happen. Or things like I have a random email address or a system that really the integration just isn't really set up to work very well, but it can send me an email, and based on content within that email, I want it to behave in a really specific way or start paging. So it allows us to handle a lot of other inputs that you might want to alarm your teams on. Another thing I talked about was deep linking into some of your monitoring tools. So one example is Datadog and VictorOps share a lot of customers. And there are elements within Datadog that people want to look at right away to help them diagnose whether or not there's actually a problem. And so using the Transmogrifier, you can have certain graphs or other elements show up in line in context with the alarm itself, saving you a lot of time having to kind of hop from system to system in order to figure out if something is actually a problem. We talked about attaching relevant assets. So this might include graphs like we talked about. It could be notes, triage documents, anything that helps the on-call person solve a problem faster. And then that advanced routing. So based on any key value pair within an alarm, you can send that alarm to another team. You could send it to a black hole. You could send it to an individual. Whatever it is that you need to do that helps your teams be more efficient. So now I'm going to introduce Daniel from 911 Labs. 911 Labs has been a beta customer of the Transmogrifier, and they have totally run with the tool. They're doing really interesting things based on use cases within their business, and I'm going to have him talk a little bit about what they've been able to accomplish.
Thanks. So this is Daniel. We kind of started this faced with an unusual problem. We're a development and technical operations company that provides these services to lots and lots of startups. So at any given time, we're both developing lots of products internally for our clients and supporting lots of other products for external clients. Because of that, we have a 24-hour follow-the-sun technical team that responds to each and every alarm that comes into VictorOps. The problem is that these can be dozens of alarms from dozens of different platforms, different companies, and different clients with different problems. And for that was a nightmare for us, because to solve those problems, every time an alarm came in, we had to dig into our documentation, start searching and iterating through that to find the right information to address that particular alarm. I'll talk a little bit later about how specifically that's working for us, but first I'm going to pass this over to Nate, who's going to actually demonstrate the product.
Thank you, Daniel. So I'm going to share my screen here. and you should see that coming up momentarily. So here is where the Transmogrifier lives in VictorOps. As you see, we have a number of different rules here. The one I want to start with first is this match here on hostname that matches dbstar.victorops.com, so any of our DBs 1 through 7. What we're going to do is annotate a runbook and a load average graph, and then we're going to transform a new field. So transformations allow you to either transform a field, so change a routing key or a severity level, or create a new field. In this case, we're creating a new field called match key. If we go back into the timeline, I already have an example pulled up here, DB7, so that matches on our rules. We open it up and we are presented with the load average graph and the runbook, in addition to a couple of other things coming from a different Transmogrifier rule. This is all very helpful, as Joni mentioned earlier, to bring in the documentation you need for this specific alert. The ability to change a routing key is another thing that Joni mentioned. It's very simple to set up. Here we see entity ID matches route change. Then we're going to transform the routing key to this is a sweet new routing key. So to see this in action, I can use a hubot command to hit a REST endpoint. And you'll see when this comes in that the routing key has been transformed. There's a little icon to show that it has been transformed that will provide you with the previous value of that field. Another thing is to quiet down alert fatigue. So if you were to, for example, take your staging environment offline and you didn't want that to wake up the people on your team, you can transform the message type to info. The nice thing about this is you only have to create the rule once. You can then enable it and disable it so that you don't have to go in and recreate the rule every time you're taking your staging environment down. To show this, we just have to create a critical alert that contains staging. You'll see that when this comes in, it's instantly changed to info. You do have a record, again, that the message type was transformed with this little icon. A little bit more on how the rules are processed. They are processed from top to bottom. So as you see, you can move them around like this. This is important because as you transform or you begin to transform different fields, you may want to have a rule that matches on that transformed field. To do that, you just have to make sure that they go in order, one to the next. If we go back to our first example here, db star, we see that we created this match key field, which using this $ double curly bracket syntax, we were able to pull out the values of host name, service description, and entity state. Then if we go all the way down to the bottom, we'll see that we have a rule that reacts off of match key to a specific value. This is actually where the rest of our annotations were coming in. And the routing key, again, is changed in another transformation. So as long as you keep the order correct, you are able to build rules one off of each other. I'm now going to pass it back to Daniel to talk about how he has implemented the rules on his end.
Thanks. So since we've been using the beta of the Transmogrifier for several months now, we've used probably all of the rules. The one that's made the biggest immediate change for us and been the most useful is the annotation. We've done it with a relatively simple, short set of rules that for every alarm that come in will create a link, an annotation link to a GitHub page. The advantage to this is that everything that we do, every alarm that fires, has documentation with it, and if there isn't documentation yet for it, it gives us a blank page where we can start filling that information in as we go. This has really been a huge change for us and really expedited our response to alarms across all of our customers.
Great, thank you everybody. I just want to point out that this feature is now available if you're already a customer or if you want to start a trial. We've got a free 14-day trial of VictorOps, and you can start using the Transmogrifier right there. We also have getting started documentation, a video overview, and case studies from 911 Labs, Craftsy, and Entrust, who have been part of our private beta program and share kind of best practices of how they're using the Transmogrifier today. And that's just all on our website under the product navigation, under the Transmogrifier navigation there as well. I know we have a couple questions, and I'm going to kick it back to Joni to get those started, and we'll wrap up here.
Great. Thank you so much. So, Daniel, I think that people listening to this webinar or other people who want to tackle using this feature may be interested in some of your best practices about, one, getting started with the tool so you can see kind of sitting down and knowing that there are several alarms that you want to annotate or otherwise transform. But can you tell us a little bit about the organizational processes that you've put together to make sure that you're constantly annotating and updating and sort of making sure that your alarms are all actionable?
That's a great question. When we talk to clients, I give the analogy that to learn to fly an airplane takes about 2 hours, but then you spend another 50 hours learning how to fly it when things go wrong. And that's kind of the way we approach all of our monitoring and support for systems as well. So when we get started, really the first thing that we will do is build out all of the alarms, build out all of the monitoring so that we know we can support them. And we put those rules, the Transmogrifier rules for the documentation in at the very beginning. What that lets us do is then trigger and fire every alarm and create every problem that we can imagine and anticipate having with the system, watching the rules fire, and then going to a blank page in GitHub where we will then write the documentation for how we resolve that problem and approach that error. We really do that for every step as we go so that we know before we go live that we've already built that whole system and that it'll work for the person that it goes off for at 3 in the morning.
That's
great,
impressive.
thank you. Thanks. Just to jump in a couple more questions. So Nate, this one's probably best for you. What are some of the common rules that you're seeing customers implement when they're first just getting started with Transmogrifier?
Now, what I'm seeing when I'm helping customers with the Transmogrifier is for transformations, it's definitely route keys and alert severity changes. When it comes to annotations, early adapters have been able to add in notes and graphs, but definitely links back to their own internal documentation is the most common.
Great. And then Joni, one for you. Can you dig in a little bit on how exactly this feature helps to reduce alert fatigue?
Yeah, no problem. So, alert fatigue is probably the number one thing talked about by people who do this job, who are on call right now when we're out at conferences or otherwise talking with them about some of their pain points. And to be honest, there's sort of a system of things that you need to do to really reduce alert fatigue. As we talked about, people are, they're pushing out code a lot faster. They're not always instrumenting all of their monitoring alarms to, follow along with how fast their systems are developing. So doing things like, using different reports that we've created that show your most frequently fired alarms and evaluating whether or not those are all truly actionable alarms, or during your on-call handoff or the pager handoff meeting, discussing if all of the alarms were actionable during that time that you were on call, and if they weren't, what to do, right? So do you change the threshold, or do you silence that alarm, which is something that you can do through Transmogrifier, or maybe just get rid of it altogether. The other piece would be if it is actionable, has it been properly annotated and documented such that any other person who gets that alarm knows what to do. So we talked about a few specific examples of using the Transmogrifier to reduce alert fatigue, and part of that has to do with sort of this pinpoint maintenance mode, such that if someone working on your system needs to maybe turn them down or prepare maintenance on them, that on-call person isn't going to be inundated by pages. So that's certainly a nice feature. Another may be that certain monitoring tools may alarm on certain things that, yes, during the day or other parts of times, you definitely want to know about those things, but they're certainly not critical enough to be woken up in the middle of the night. And using our tool based on key value pairs, you can choose to have those alerts behave differently. So maybe it changes the state of them and they just go to info, or maybe you route them to another team that just gets emails as part of that escalation policy. So people always know that it happens, but it's certainly not waking anyone up in the middle of the night.
Great. So one last question. This one's for you, Daniel. I'm curious, as you guys have been using this feature for a while, can you speak to at all some of your time to resolution being decreased?
That's a great question. I'd love to be able to give you a specific number. I have to admit, before we started using VictorOps, our alarm aggregating solution didn't really give us granular enough metrics to know what parts took a long time. But I can tell you, anecdotally, I really think we probably shave about 10 minutes off of every alarm that comes in, not having to dig through and find that process, that we're turning around alarms now that total maybe took 15 or 20 minutes to resolve before that we're doing in less than 10 minutes.
That's great. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Well, I think we'll leave it at that for today. Thank you for joining us, and we invite you now to go transmogrify something.